Good morning. It's great to be here. Just going to introduce ourselves real quick. We are Bryan and Jacinda Martin. We've been serving in the Philippines since 2002. It's about 15 years now. There's a picture of my awesome family. The Lord has really blessed us, blessed me with an amazing wife. And I wanted to tell a quick story about the last 2 years because God has taken us out of something that became comfortable to us and has moved us into something very, very uncomfortable. And especially for my wife, as she has had to learn how to dive. Part of our entry strategy involved diving and restoring the coral reefs. And she was absolutely terrified. So I have the highest respect for my wife. She has had to go through a lot. She has had to face her fears. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about today. Now, we have to face a lot of fears. This is something that I was really afraid of. If you can see that 7-foot sea snake down there, I was doing something down close, and I wasn't paying too much attention, and the thing came up about 2 feet away from my head when I first noticed it. This is extremely poisonous snake and somewhat aggressive, so that really freaked me out. Had to face that fear. But there's something else that even freaked me out even more. And it came when I received an email from this man. In the email, he asked if I would be willing to preach on Missions Sunday. And that really freaked me out because we just grew up in the South Bay. We were just normal people like all of you. So if you could imagine what it would be like to stand up here and give the morning sermon, that's what I'm facing this morning. But I'll tell you, in our ministry, we are always challenging people to go out of their comfort zones. We work with really poor people, downtrodden people who don't think that they can do anything, who don't think that God can use them in any greater capacity. And so we're always challenging people to step out, and we're always challenging people to do something uncomfortable. And so who am I to say no to a request that makes me uncomfortable? So I'm just glad to be here this morning. Also glad to be here with the likes of Joe Hellerman, Brandon Cash, and people who are my spiritual mentors for a big part of my life. So it's a privilege to be here this morning. I want to ask a question. I want you guys to think about this, contemplate this in your heart. What are the problems that you see in our world? What are the problems that you see around you in your community? We live in a broken world. What breaks your heart? God is speaking to each one of us differently. What things that you see around you, the brokenness, the sad things, what are the things that really just break your heart? Maybe it's at your job and there's unbelievers at your job and you see their brokenness in their lives. Maybe on your way to work you pass by homeless people, or maybe it's about the inner city violence that kids are growing up in every day. Or maybe it's your family. Maybe there's family members that don't know Jesus who are really struggling and need the Lord. What is it that God places on your heart? And then ask another question. What does God want you to do about it? So this morning I want to talk to you about Nehemiah, and then another guy who I would describe as a Filipino Nehemiah, an incredible man that I got to meet and know. And so we've been gone for 4 years in this previous term since we've been back to the States. The first 2 years of that was setting up this church, and we're so proud of this church. They're so awesome. God enabled us to play a part in starting this church, and it's a network of house churches who are growing and still reaching out. And they got to the point where we had trained ourselves out of a job, which was our goal all along. And so we were happy when we got to leave, although sad because we had to leave all those relationships behind. But they're doing awesome at leading their own church and continuing the vision that God has given them. So incredible blessing from the Lord that was. They call themselves the United Christians of Payo. Payo is the town they live in. Now, this created an interesting issue for us. We had already chosen the next place to go. So the work was finished there. And some missionaries were visiting us. They were brand new missionaries. And we just happened to be going on a survey trip to this next place we were thinking of going to. And so he said, hey, guys, come along with us. They came along, and they were just amazed at what they saw. And they just said, this is the place that God has for us. And we're like, oh, that was our place. But praise the Lord, because he's multiplying the missionaries, and now there's a team there, and they're doing an amazing work there, incredible work. But that created a problem for us. We thought we had worked that part out, and as to where we were going next, and then we had to go and figure out what to do next. And so we just were on our knees before the Lord, praying and fasting for weeks, asking the Lord to reveal to us what he would have us do next. And that's when he brought us to a place called Karamoan. Now, Karamoan is a place where there are less than 1% Christians in this town. There's 50,000 people there. There's 49 separate towns spread out geographically all around. And they are primarily animistic Roman Catholic. Now, what does animistic mean? Animism is a form of religion that worships spirits and deities and objects that have spiritual power. And so you merge that with Roman Catholicism, and you get something that looks kind of like this. And it's more about the idols and worshiping the idols and all that than it is about really worshiping Jesus. Now, I'm not here to say bad things about Catholics or anything, but Catholicism in the Philippines is very different from Catholicism here in the West. And this is what it's mostly about. Also, this video, kind of disturbing, but people actually crucify themselves because they believe it gives them spiritual power. And so that's the kind of religion that we're working with among the people. And then, so what breaks our heart? We started doing surveys looking for a new place to go. And so we went into Karamoan, and it was incredible to see the poverty that we came up against. We had been living in a poor town for the previous 10 years, but we weren't prepared for what we found when we went to Karamoan. It was so much more. The people there are neglected. They are oppressed. They are the lowest of the low, and they are the neediest, but they're the last to get the resources that are so needed. The government overlooks them because how remote they are, and everyone looks down upon them. One story, my son goes to the public school with all the other kids, and one day his friend had done something to him that made him really sad. And so he was upset, and we said, hey, do you want to go and talk to your friend? And let's talk this out maybe. You can tell your friend and that he hurt your feelings and that you don't like that. Okay, so my son's 9 years old. So we walk down the street, and it was Jacinda and my son. And as they began to approach the kid's house, my son saw the broken down gate. He saw the mud floors inside their house. And he saw his 75-year-old grandmother outside washing the clothes. And he turned to my wife and he said, you know what? I think my friend has a hard enough life. I don't think I need to talk to him. And he went home. So my kids are growing up in a really different, with a different experience than what I grew up. But I'm glad to see the compassion that they have. This is the kinds of things that break our hearts. Another thing that we see in these remote coastal towns is lack of education opportunity. So one town that we are working in now, they only have an elementary school until 6th grade. And then the kids, there's no opportunity for them to go to high school after that. There's no middle school, there's no high school anywhere near them. And so there's so many needs. And this is some pictures about like what it looks like in our town. One of the things that we came across was in these coastal towns, the people were struggling, and we went in as we're doing a survey to ask, what do you guys need? What are the problems in this area? And they said, we need more boats. I thought, okay, that's strange. Why do you need more boats? They said, because there's no more fish around here, anywhere near here. So we have to go farther and farther out to find food for our families. And we said, well, why is that? And they said, we don't know. So we put on some goggles and started looking under the ocean. And what we saw was total devastation under the water. It was all rubble and algae beds where there used to be a beautiful, thriving coral reef. And so we asked them, why is it like this here? What happened? Well, they said, well, we use dynamite to catch fish. I said, well, okay, that explains it. And so we realized that what the people really needed wasn't boats. They needed their ecosystem to recover. They needed the fish to come back. They needed to care for the environment so that they could earn a living off of it again. And so we started researching, how do you rebuild the reef? I mean, how do you restore the ecosystem? And this is a technology that we found called BioRock, and it takes an area that would normally take 25 years for the reef to grow back and recover, and we're able to do it in 5 years. And that's where we live. It's in a remote part of Luzon, which is where Manila is located. It's that little yellow area. They actually filmed Survivor there for 2 years, the reality show Survivor. So if you're familiar with that, you know that they go to remote places. That's where we live now. So we need to care about people. And we need to rely on God's promises. But let's read Nehemiah, because Nehemiah is an awesome guy. And as we were experiencing this, I started to see that Nehemiah's story was really relating to ours. And maybe you'll see that too. In Nehemiah 1 through 4, it says, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah, and I was asking them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Now, this is what broke Nehemiah's heart. The Jews were in exile at the time, and so God was just starting to bring them back. And Nehemiah is brokenhearted, and what does he do? He goes before the Lord and starts to pray. Now, we don't know what he was praying about. We'll see that next, what his prayer was. So we need to care. We need to allow that our broken hearts as a sign that God, maybe he wants us to do something about that. But then we need to rely on God's promises. And Jacinda and I, we started trying to figure out what we could do to help the people in Caramoan. We started to make plans, but we had no idea how we were going to do this. We were not trained marine biologists. We were not trained in helping poor people. Although we had lived among them, we weren't livelihood development type people or anything. And so we had to trust the Lord. And we had to rely on God's promises. And we had to make a plan. And so as we made a plan, we were worried because where would we live? How would God provide what we needed in order to do this crazy project and try and help the people? We had no idea how God was going to do that. And this video, this is Google Earth. It's amazing, though, because this is exactly what we saw on one of our survey trips. We weren't looking for a house, but as we were just driving down the road, this is exactly what we saw. You're going to see it. And we came upon this house right here. And we said, wow, that's a nice house. We're not looking for a house yet, but wouldn't it be nice to live there? And so we asked the neighbors, are the owners renting this? And they said, yes, they are, and here's their information. We called, and all of a sudden, we had a house. Incredible. We weren't even looking for it, and God provided it for us. Also, we met somebody because doing reef restoration costs money, and a lot of money sometimes. And we were like, how are we going to pay for this? As we started looking and researching, we came upon this guy, and he's the owner of the nicest resort in this area. And I just called him up, and I said what we were there to do. And he said, that sounds awesome. Will you come to my resort and do a project right in front of in that community? He said, and I'll pay for everything. And so God provided everything we needed to do the project. And then we knew that we needed to educate the people about their environmental issues. We knew that in order for a project to succeed, you couldn't just put stuff out there and let the people continue to blow stuff up. It's not going to work. So we had to go and we needed to educate the people. But this was a new area, new language. Although they understand Tagalog, we didn't speak their version of Bicol, which is another language. So we went to the community college that was in our town, and we formed the Catamoan Coral Reef Project. And it was a volunteer organization, and there just happened to be a school in our town that was training people to become teachers. And so we enlisted the help of all these volunteers, and just awesome kids, so much potential, so smart, and they go out there and they work so hard for no money. We just give them lunch, and they teach in these communities. They teach the kids, they teach the adults in their heart language about the environmental issues. And we bring the Lord into this by going through Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, where God created man, put him on the earth, and he gave us the job to take care of creation. And as they teach that, people realize that the earth is not just a vending machine, it's actually something we're supposed to care for. And so they start getting Bible study and realizing God's role that he's given us. Now, Catamoan has about 50,000 people, population. And as we were working in these two towns, we were seeing some amount of success, and we were learning through failure and retrying and all that. And we started to get an idea of what needed to happen in a town in order to transform it from this poverty-stricken thing, victim of the environment, to something that's thriving and caring for the environment in a sustainable way. We met, so the Lord kind of put it on our hearts to expand what we were doing. And it was a challenge to think, how would we do this bigger? Because we were already flat out with the two towns we were already doing projects in. And but the Lord was, spurring us on, what would this look like to make it bigger? So we thought about Catamoan and the 50,000 people there in the 49 towns. And out of those towns, we identified 13 towns that needed a project. And so we said, well, maybe if we went from 2 to 13, that would be a lot bigger. And we had no idea how we'd accomplish that. But you know what? The Lord provided for this one. Maybe he'll provide for that one too. Well, we went to a conference, and there we met the governor and his dad, a senator. And when they heard about what we were doing in Catamoan, they approached us and they said, we want to hire you guys to do this for our constituency of 1.8 million people. And that just blew our minds. And that just happened shortly before we came. And we don't know how God's going to provide for that or what that's going to turn into. But we know that the Lord has been faithful to us so far, and we trust him to provide whatever we need to do it. But it's still blowing our minds. Okay, so Nehemiah made a plan also. And let's read that. And this is his prayer. So after he heard about the plight of the Israelites and the walls broken down, he starts praying. And he says, O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now I was cupbearer to the king. And so even before he said the prayer, he already had a plan in mind for what he was going to do, if the Lord provided. And now let's look at the next verse. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of the Lord, of my God, was upon me. Isn't that amazing? Like, he made a plan before he prayed, and he asked for favor before the king. Now, this secular king actually provided everything that Nehemiah needed to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. What an incredible thing. Do we believe that even the secular communities around us can have a part in bringing in the kingdom of God? Have we ever asked? Maybe there's resources out there. God owns everything, and he can bring anything to our aid that is needed to accomplish his will. Okay. So we need to care. What are the things that are broken around us? We need to rely on God's promises. He promised that he's going to supply all of our needs. And then we need to make a plan. But finally, we need to risk and sacrifice. This is the Filipino Nehemiah that God allowed me to meet. Now, we were flat out, with all of this. We were on a steep learning curve trying to figure out how to do all this crazy stuff. We have 100 volunteers in our volunteer organization. We're dealing with government officials and communities and all this. And then I get an email from a coworker, and he says, hey, would you come out and do some training for some pastors in how to do church multiplication? And both Jacinta and I read that email separately, and we both got the sense that God wanted me to go to this training. And it didn't make any sense for what we were doing, and we were so busy. But we both got the sense that I needed to go to this training. So I said, I don't know what this is for, Lord, but I'll go and do it. So we went. So I went to this training, and they assigned me to mentor somebody, and it happened to be this guy named June and his wife. And the second I saw June, I knew that the Lord had something for me to learn, and that it wasn't about me teaching someone else. This was a man that commanded respect just by being in his presence. He was trained in missions by Westerners. He had advanced degrees in theology, and he was doing an amazing work. And he told me his story. He said that one time he was going through this one town, and things were so bad, it broke his heart. Because what he saw were malnourished children sniffing glue in the streets. He saw just devastating poverty all over the place. And he quickly saw the reason why it was like that. These narco politicians had taken this town over. There were drug lords who had taken the town over. And the drug problem in this town was so bad, you could walk down the streets and there were little stores, and in the windows of the stores were hanging little sachets, little plastic packets of cocaine. You could just tear one off and pay the person to get the drugs. That's how bad and out of control it was. And the results of that kind of a place was very evident on the people. It was awful. His heart broke. He said, somebody has to do something about this. And what he did was not probably something that we would think a pastor would do. Because what needed to be done? It was out of control. So what he did was he found a bunch of young people, young believers, and he formed a security organization. And he got training from the Philippine Army for his men, and he got them guns, and he sent them out through this town, and they started arresting all the drug dealers and all the drug lords and putting them in prison. Then he saw that the people were so poor and so in need, and that none of the government resources were getting to them because it was such a scary place to go to. Nobody was willing to go there. So he started engaging the government officials, and he started bringing the aid that was, their right to have back into this community, and it just started to transform the people's lives in this community. after that, and people started seeing, and they knew that he was the one who had brought this aid back in. They're like, why are you doing this? Can you please tell us? Why are you doing this for us? Why did you come here? And then he got the opportunity to preach to this entire town. And so many people became Christians. And so many churches got started there. Incredible story. I was so inspired, and I went home and I knew why God had brought me there. It was to show me that the social justice, the kingdom type work sometimes is necessary before you can really bring in the gospel. Sometimes the people are so needy and so poor that they're not ready for the gospel because they're just worried about where their next meal is coming from. And the Lord kind of made me feel better about what we were doing, because we felt kind of guilty as missionaries. Aren't we supposed to be saying Jesus, Jesus, Jesus to everybody and getting everybody to believe? But we were doing this social work first. And so God used June in my life to help us understand that we were doing what God wanted us to do, and that this was the preparing the way for the gospel that needed to happen. 2 months after I met June, I got an email, and it said that he had been murdered by probably the drug dealers. And so we need to risk and sacrifice. Risk and sacrifice. And Nehemiah's story picks up again here. And it says, But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And then the next verse. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. And Nehemiah calls the people to fight, and we need to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. We need to be advocates for the things that break our heart every day when we go and see them. In our daily lives, in our Samaria, around LA, and to the ends of the earth. And this has a good ending, and I'll read that in conclusion. It says in Nehemiah 6:15 and 16, so the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. And I believe each one of us has been given gifts and experiences in our life that can be uniquely used by God to accomplish his purposes in bringing in the kingdom in this age. Thank you very much for this time.